Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Rudy's Rant Powered by Come On Now, the podcast. I am your host, Rudy Rodriguez Shomot. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday. Merry Christmas, happy holiday, happy Hanukkah, and all that good stuff, whatever it is that you celebrate. I hope it was a very wonderful day and has been a wonderful holiday season for all of you. I'm back and I have another video for you. But before I jump in, let me again thank you for your continued support of this channel. I greatly appreciate you. As you can see, I have the TV on in my background. I am watching a college football bowl game right now in the background at the same time doing this because I am in that college football mood. I know not everyone enjoys the college football playoff situation. I know not everyone enjoys bowl games. I enjoy bowl games whether they're playing with bums or whether they're playing with starters because I actually like to see what can possibly happen. And I don't want to call them bums, but the younger players. Because, like, for example, today, Navy beat Oklahoma. Remember that same Oklahoma team that beat Alabama by 3 touchdowns? The same Alabama that people were crying for to be in the college football playoff? Well, Oklahoma lost to Navy, and people will come back and say, oh, well, Oklahoma, had a lot of guys going to the portal. Yeah, that's very, very true. But Oklahoma's backups are still 4 and 5 star and 3, 4, 5 star players. There's not a 3-star football player at Navy. Like, let's be real with ourselves. There's not a high recruit at Navy. The guys that are at Navy are academically gifted individuals who got letters of recommendation from members of Congress. Like, these aren't just football players. These are guys that are going to go defend our country. They're not football players. They're warriors, but they're not elite football players. They play a style that today to other teams is almost like, oh my God, who the hell runs the triple option type situation? And which is an offense that got run all the time in the 80s and 70s and 80s by teams, especially in the Big Eight, like Nebraska and Oklahoma. But there are a lot of people right now that have a big problem with the college football playoff, and they're saying, I told you so. The games in the first round would suck, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, at the end of the day, were they as competitive as we would have liked? The answer is obviously no. The most competitive game that we saw was the Texas-Clemson game that Texas won 38-24. That Clemson actually had the lead to start, fell behind 21-7, fell behind, I think it was 31-14 or 31-10. They came back, made it 31-24 in the fourth. Then Texas, 31-24 in the fourth, and then Texas hit a big touchdown to put it away. But overall, yeah, the games were blowouts. Ohio State drubbed Tennessee 42-17. Penn State crushed SMU, which obviously was a bad look for the ACC. But that game was not. Did you watch it? That was a quarterback for SMU who looked like he had no idea what he was doing. And that was the thing that sucked about it was SMU's defense was holding strong. But the QB for SMU was just giving them pick sixes. And it wasn't like they were difficult. He was making horrible throws. And they had a chance early on to take the lead, and he throws a pick. There's there's things that happen in that game, and the same thing can be said for the Indiana game. In both the SMU and Indiana game, you had interceptions inside of the 10-yard line that could have otherwise ended up in touchdowns for both SMU and Indiana. And if they get a 7-0 lead, you don't know where that game goes. You just don't know because it's a road game. It's a playoff game. There's all kinds of things that go into football games. And we all know that there's ebbs and flows in football. And if I jump up 7-0, that could change the dynamic of the game. But in both situations with SMU and Indiana, they throw those early interceptions that basically shift the game. Penn State wins 38-10. Notre Dame beats Indiana 27-17. After the interception, they go for a 98-yard touchdown run. There's the game, ball game. Took the life out of Indiana. And I will tell you this. I question some of the things that the Indiana coach did. I thought he was absolutely out of his mind punting the ball in the fourth quarter. So, but the final score of that game was 27-17. It wasn't obviously as close as the score would indicate, albeit they did get a onside kick. And if they had gotten that 2-point conversion, make it 27-19, people would have been a lot more nervous on that next onside kick. But They didn't get the 2 points, and it was a 10-point game. The game was essentially over at that point. Here's my problem, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you like this. I think the playoffs are great. The results of these, not so much, naturally. And you're going to have games now where you're going to have Georgia playing Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's going to drop kick Georgia. I think they're going to drop kick Georgia. Georgia's playing without Carson Beck. Do not tell me that the freshman quarterback who came in for a half against Texas and played well enough to get Georgia in, get them the W. Because if Georgia loses that game, I think Georgia ends up out of the playoff. If there's any precedent set by last year where Alabama jumps in over Florida State with Jordan Travis going out with an injury, I think they had set a precedent. And I have this feeling, on top of the fact that Alabama had beaten Georgia in the regular season, despite losing to Oklahoma, despite losing to Vanderbilt, despite losing to Tennessee, that they would get in over Georgia had Georgia lost that game to Texas. Because you knew when Carson Beck went down, that dude game, had they lost, he would not have been ready to play a playoff game in a week. No way in hell. Week and a half, whatever. Nah. So them winning obviously gave them some time to get practice time with the backup. But let's be real. Georgia's not the same team they were the last few years. They're good. They're not great. This is a very wide open field, in my opinion. I think people thinking that Penn State's just going to run roughshod on Boise State, I think it's crazy. The same thing with Texas and Arizona State. I think Arizona State's a lot better than people think and give them credit for. They've been rolling. Now, I could be wrong, and Texas could blow them out. Or Texas could also look like they looked versus Georgia on offense, because I don't think Quinn Ewers is that good. I think he's very, very overhyped. And then you have the game that should be for playing for the game that should be for the national championship, realistically, even though Ohio State took a big fat L against Michigan in their last game of their regular season on their home field. But realistically, talent for talent, these are probably the two best teams in the country, and they're going to play in the quarterfinals. I think Oregon's going to win again. And I think at the end of the day, Oregon's going to win the national championship. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. But again, I think it's a wide open field. That said, here is my issue with people's opinions about how adding teams was wrong. And in fact, if you want my true 100% opinion, I think it should be a 16-team playoff. I've been calling for 16 teams in a playoff for over a decade. This whole playoff schmayoff shit, it's a joke. 16 teams, no different than the FCS does it. Why the hell can't the FBS do it? Do it the same way? Why is it easy for them but so difficult for the FBS system? We already know the bowl games don't mean anything. And if you want to be real on top of that, I would eliminate all bowl games as well. I would 16-team playoff, dump the bowl games, get rid of them all. Get rid of them all. You don't need to have any bowl games beyond the 16 teams that make the playoff. You don't make the first round games home field advantage. You put them in a bowl game, and you have your rotating, whatever they have now. They have a rotating 6. You make it a rotating, what would it be then? A rotating 14? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. What, 15? You make it a rotating 15. Whatever. Who cares? But you do them on neutral fields. You don't do these things on home fields. I mean, they work too hard to get to this point. This isn't FCS where they don't have the funds to go to neutral fields. Teams do get home field advantage, for which no one's ever complained. No one has ever complained about the home field advantage situation. All that said, we're looking at these games right now where you don't know what's going to happen this weekend. You have no idea. Or next week, what is it? Next Wednesday. You don't know what's Tuesday and Wednesday. You don't know what's going to happen. What you know will happen is you're going to have two more games a week later, and then you'll have a national championship on January 20th. Now, here's my problem with people who have an issue with the playoff system. Issue is, have you been watching for the last decade? Since 2014, when they brought this thing in, it has been What is your problem with the blowout? I know we'd like to have every game be close. We'd like to have every game go down to the wire and all that good stuff. Since the playoffs started with the four teams, I'm starting with the four teams. I'm not going beyond that. I'm going to four teams. There's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's been 10 games. I'm sorry, 9. 9 games out of 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30. 9 of the 30 games in the 4-team playoff history were decided by less than one score. One score. 9 of the 30 playoff games were decided by less than 10 points. So what you have there over the last decade with the 4-team playoff is 21 blowouts. Did you care? Did it bother you? While teams got left out and others snuck in as a 4 seed? People are so easy to remember last year, where Michigan beats Alabama 27-20 and in overtime, and Washington beats Texas 37-31. You remember that? You remember TCU 51-45 over Michigan, Georgia 42-41 over Ohio State. You remember Bama beating Georgia 26-23. You remember Bama beating Clemson 45-40. You remember Clemson beating Alabama for 35-31. That's what you remember. Do you remember Oregon beating Florida State 59-20? Do you remember OSU beating Bama 42-20 in the national championship game? Do you remember Clemson beating OU 37-17 or Michigan State 38-0 or Bama beating Washington 24-7 or Clemson beating Ohio State 31-0 or Bama beating Clemson 24-6 or Clemson beating Notre Dame 30-3 or Clemson beating Bama 44-16 or Bama beating OU 45-34 or LSU drop kicking OU 63-28 in a game, if you remember, probably could have been a lot worse, or LSU beating Clemson 42-25, or Bama beating Notre Dame 31-14, and Ohio State beating Clemson 49-28, and then Bama beating Ohio State 52-24 in the national championship, or Bama beating Cincinnati 27-6, UGA beating Michigan 34-11, and UGA beating Bama 33-18, or UGA beating TCU 65-7, which was why people said TCU shouldn't be in there, but the problem was TCU beat Michigan to get there. Or Michigan winning last year by 21 points in the national championship game. The point is, blowouts have been happening in the playoffs for a decade. What did you get now from this? You got a whole bunch of people watching more college football. I do not understand why people are losing their minds over some blowouts when you've been watching them for a fucking decade. It's literally absurd. It's absolutely absurd. We've had a 39-point win in a playoff game, a 35-point win in a playoff game when there were 4 teams. None of these teams lost by 35 or 39. None of them. In fact, the one that should have been the most even was Ohio State and Tennessee. Between the 8 and the 9, and Ohio State crushed Tennessee. So spare me the self-righteous garbage about the best, the most deserving, all that crap. Put 16 teams in there. It's better for college football than watching this shit I'm watching behind me where the best receivers, the best players don't play. We need the best guys out there playing college football. And if it ends up in a blowout, so be it. Georgia Tech today loses a bowl game to Vanderbilt. And their best receiver for Georgia Tech, a team that doesn't throw the ball, doesn't play because he's opted out as transferred. Like, this is what's going on in college football. It's happening before your eyes. Guys aren't sticking around. Like, I mean, you think that Georgia Tech could have beaten Vanderbilt if they had Singleton on their team, their receiver, Eric Singleton? Their best wide receiver. He didn't play. And the game was 35-27. So, yeah, would I like the games to be closer? Absolutely. But you guys are fools. You guys who keep coming up with this bullshit about how we don't need all this. You know what? You've been watching, and there's been blowouts. You've been watching them. You watched them last year. The national championship last year was a 21-point game. Yes, I know it was closer early on. Ended up in a blowout. LSU Clemson, when they won 42-25, was not that close. When LSU beat Oklahoma, it was not that close. When Oregon crushed Florida State, it was a bad game. When these teams are getting blown out, they're bad games. It's just the way it is. We've had multiple bad national championship games, blowouts. They are what they are. It happens. But don't sit here and tell me you'd rather watch the Rape Bowl over watching another playoff game that has meaning with everyone on the field. I will tell you this, Indiana, if they had scored in that first possession, would have been prime position to win that game over Notre Dame. They got emotionally messed up on that play, and it happens. It does. Right now, here we go. I got Washington State versus Syracuse. Syracuse is up now 35-27. Folks, all I'm saying at the end of the day is relax when it comes to, it's a blowout, because you've been watching them. The same way you turned on the NFL on Wednesday to watch Kansas City smash Pittsburgh. You watched it. 24 million people watched it. Or the way you watched Lamar Jackson in Baltimore dismantle Houston 31-2. 24 more million people watched it. Because people in this country still love football. Which is why we have 14 teams in the NFL playoffs, when the reality is we really only need 4 on each side. The division winners. We don't need wild cards. We don't need them. Why do we have them? Television, money. All of this shit revolves around money. If you want to ask me what I would be happy to go back to, I'd be happy to go back to the 80s, where the Big 8, which was back then, now the Big 12, comes to the Orange Bowl. The Big East or an independent or an ACC plays in the Orange Bowl. They meet up. The Sugar Bowl, SEC versus whoever. The Rose Bowl, Big 10 versus Pac-10 doesn't exist anymore because now the Pac-10 is disintegrated. They meet in the Rose Bowl. The Cotton Bowl has XYZ against someone else. All these bowl games, these major bowl games, have people playing in these games. And you have the chance of the 5th-ranked team winning a national championship based on winning a game that day, because 1, 2, 3, and 4 all lose in different bowl games. And it's happened before. It makes it all exciting. And you may think I'm crazy, but that's the football I grew up to. And yes, there are the years like, man, I wish this team could play that team. I wish. But you know what? We all wish for something. It doesn't always happen for us. But you had a better chance of having great bowl games that mattered, than the bullshit that we get to watch today for 2 weeks before these playoffs, and watch these trash can bowl games featuring freshmen. But anyhow, that's all I got. What are your thoughts on this topic? I'd love to hear what you got to say about this. I'm good with the college football playoff. I got no problem with it. I want to see them expand it to 16 teams and just eliminate all other bowl games. There's no point to them. Those are my thoughts. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I love that you came here to watch me rant again. This is Rudy's Rant. Facts over feelings. Like, subscribe, follow, ring that bell. Come on now.